My name is Shachar Lari. I'm 42 years old, or I'll be 42 in a week. I'm married to Tali. I have two daughters, Shai and Ziv. Shai means a present, Ziv means light or luminescence or something like that. That's used in a conversation. I studied mathematics, physics, philosophy. I was actually on my way to do a PhD in philosophy when I came across a company that was doing innovation consulting, and their pitch was basically innovation could be structured and could follow a methodology. And I thought to myself, that can't be right. I mean, I'm a creative guy. I think I'm innovative. How can there be a method to this madness? And I sometimes say I'm a convert because I went through a process. I actually called them about a week after I was in a workshop, and I called them a week later and asked them, are you guys hiring? They said, no, we're not hiring, but send us your CV. A month later, I started working there, and for me it was a massive transformation because I was in my graduate studies in philosophy, and my vision, was kind of clear to me. But a few things happened. This was in 2005. Some of them tragic, some of them less. My thesis advisor at the time passed away from a disease, and I always used her to kind of understand why I'm in academia. Because every time I would come to her and tell her, oh man, people don't understand me, I don't know if what I'm doing is even important, she would tell me, no, you're doing important work, you should stay here. And she passed away and there was nobody to hold me there, and then I came across that company and I started working there. And from wearing sandals and shorts and, sitting on the grass in the Tel Aviv University, and I found myself in a suit. Well, not always with a tie, but yes, with a jacket and proper shoes. Sitting in boardrooms of some of the largest companies in the world, and working with different companies on innovation, how to innovate, how to think creatively, how to design strategies of innovation. And there's an expression in Hebrew, doesn't matter if it's true or false as long as you say it with confidence. So if you ever see a consultant telling you this is how we need to do things, then you know that it's not necessarily true if they say it with, pathos. So, and I think there's a wonderful fit between multinationals and Israeli consultants, because I think one of the things that are interesting for innovation and that happen in Israel is that Israel is very young. We don't have hundreds of years of culture of business doing. Israel exists for 70 years, and in these 70 years, we didn't have a benchmark. We didn't have a pattern that we could kind of reflect to when we're doing something. And they also say that constraints foster creativity, or that necessity is the mother of innovation, and I think it's true. I mean, I grew up in Israel in the 80s. I remember that the main source of export in Israel in the early 80s, late 70s, was oranges, citrus. Okay, we sold oranges. That was what we were doing. The high-tech, this is the guy that I was talking about. His name is Oded.
Hi, guys. Sorry, ignore me.
I don't know who she is. So I think that in a way, when Israelis meet multinationals, something really interesting happens, and that is Israelis are a little bit infantile, in the sense that they're childish, in the sense that if they don't know something, they'll give it a try. The fact that we've never done it before doesn't mean that we can't do it. There's a quote from, I always forget how to say it in English, the Bilby. Never mind, it's a play. Basically, there's a girl there and she says, I've never done it before, so I'm sure that I will succeed. And I think it's a state of mind that many times is very conducive for innovation. So I did that for a few years, and I found myself inventing new types of Philadelphia cheese in Australia, diapers in the United States. I was involved in the BP crisis in the Gulf of Mexico in 2010. I spent 2 months in Houston leading a team of 30 experts from all over the world trying to cap a well. I was going around the world and working with different multinationals on interesting projects. I wasn't an expert. I was never an expert in any of the things that I did. It was really good that I studied mathematics and physics and philosophy because it gave me a really broad language, and I could quite quickly speak with experts, technical experts about what they do. I am not brave at all in what I do, but I still do things that other people consider very brave. And the reason for this dissonance is because there are certain things that I am fearless about. There's a difference between being fearless and being brave, because if you are brave, then you identify the danger and you overcome it by being brave. If you're fearless, you're basically stupid. You don't even realize that something dangerous happened. Yeah, I remember my first startup. I did my MBA at INSEAD in France, and I remember I was doing my startup after my graduation, and a friend of mine was asking me, how are things going? And I told him, I feel like I swam into the ocean and I can't see the shore anymore. And he said, that's horrible. And I said, no, I only meant that there's no point in going back. Maybe the other shore is closer. Swear to God, verbatim, this is what I said, and I really was confounded. I couldn't understand why he found it brave. And I thought, what's the problem? You know, I'm swimming. Everything's fine. I used to rock climb, and I remember there was a famous French rock climber, and he used to solo climb. He used to climb cliffs without a rope or anything else. And a journalist asked him, are you not afraid climbing these cliffs without any protection, without any rope? And he said, I don't understand what's to be afraid. I'm holding the rope. So sometimes, by the way, he died. It's true. In an accident, he was climbing a building. Somebody opened the window. He fell to his death. So I'm not saying that there's no risk in what we are doing. I'm not saying that there's no inherent risk in innovation. I'm just saying that for me, meeting multinationals with having very little to lose and keeping an open mind and trying to think to myself, you know, I've never done it before, but let's try. It was useful. So I did that for a few years. Then I started my own company, and relevant. What I do is called disruption management. I want to start with a few basic offerings. One, disruption is not a good thing. Okay? When people keep on, you know, chanting disruption is not a good thing. It's a description of something really bad happening to a company. Okay? People that want to disrupt themselves. Not a good idea, I think. There are reasons why companies exist and do so well in what they do. You need to be careful if someone else disrupts you. If someone else changes the environment and impacts you. But disrupt yourself, one, highly unlikely. Very, very rare examples of this happening, almost never does. It's extremely difficult to do. And two, it's not clear that it's a good thing. I always tell companies, if you want to disrupt something, look for a target. Look for a different industry or a different business or a competitor and think, how can you do things that will change their business environment? So, I deal with disruption management, and that means that I work with large multinationals on the one hand and with startups on the other hand. I spend most of my days in a co-sharing working space closer to where I live, so not here, but very similar in all of its aspects. And I also work with the startups and with the sources of innovation or sources of disruption. I'll give you another insight that I think is trivial. Very few people get up in the morning and decide to disrupt someone. Startups do not get up in the morning and say, okay, how am I going to kill the hotel industry by developing Airbnb? This is not something that goes through the mind of an entrepreneur. I'm telling you this both from my own experience as an entrepreneur and also by seeing and talking to other people. Startup leaders, entrepreneurs are dead focused on one thing, and that is they have an itch to scratch, they have a problem to solve, they have a vision to realize. They do not care about the incumbents at all. Okay? They're not interested in them, they're not thinking about them, they're not working with them most of the time. They are focused on what they're doing. What usually happens as a side effect is that other companies get disrupted. So what I do is I work with the large multinationals and with the startups, and sometimes I connect the two together. Sometimes I try and help bring these two things together. The reason I try to do it is because many times when corporations and startups meet, the results are not very good. Yes, it is a little bit of an understatement. There are a lot of reasons for that. It's not because of bad will or anything like that. Corporates, I many times talk to corporate venture people that really, these are their KPIs. They need to know how to work with startups. The yield is abysmal, terrible. And one of the reasons for that is that, for example, the KPIs or the incentives are very, very different for a startup or for a multinational corporation. Or the pace, you know, the rhythm in which you do things. How fast can you move? How flexible can you be? I'm who I am, and I want to talk about what we're going to talk about. Somebody once told me that if you want to give a good talk, say what you're going to say, then say it, then say what you said. So, I'm going to say what I'm going to say. Hopefully, in the end, you can remind me and I'll review everything. Oh, I forgot to ask one thing. How much time do I have? No, I just stopped.
You have 25 minutes.
25? Yeah, I'm going to take 30. Okay. So, let me tell you what we're going to talk about, and then we're going to talk about it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of disruption. Okay, so origin of disruption. Just because I think it's really cool and interesting, and I want to share it with you. I'm going to talk about 3 key elements that I think are essential if companies want to survive what I call the age of surprise. So we're going to talk a little bit about the age of surprise. And then I'm going to talk about 3 key elements. One is variance. One is humility. And the other one is rigidness or flexibility. That's it. Okay? Okay. So, first of all, let's talk about what is disruption. Anybody wants to take a stab? What is disruption?
Complete breakdown of.
What's your name?
A complete breakdown
No,
of.
your name. Sorry.
Oh, Michael is my name.
Michael. Yes, Michael.
A complete breakdown of a current system.
I like that. Good. So disruption, yes, it's very close to my definition. There are a lot of definitions. The term disruptive innovation was coined by Professor Clayton Christensen in 1995 in an article that he wrote for the HBR, in which he was starting to talk about how technologies and innovations are disrupting markets. Disruption is a very weird name because if you think about it, the word disruption feels like something that, okay, there is a disruption. We can, get over the disruption, fix it, and then move on. But in many ways, the way that the disruption turned to a concept that describes almost total destruction. Really a deep and fundamental change to the business environment that renders a lot of the existing strategies ineffective anymore. So there are a lot of definitions. I want to discern between a few things. One, disruption. Stop using this word, it's not useful, I think. Disruption is a really bad word because many times what corporations do in offense is that you replace the word innovation with the word disruption and you think that something really changed. And nothing changes. You do exactly the same thing. I've been spending the last 15 years working with multinationals. Innovation in the age of disruption is the same as the innovation that was 10 years ago. You simply outsource some of it externally, but you do a lot of similar things. It's not necessarily a bad thing. Sustaining innovation, or more traditional innovation, is how you create value, and it's a very effective way. But the word disruption by itself, you don't need it anymore. I would cross it off. What I would talk about is disruptive innovation. Now that's interesting. And to your definition, Michael, right? Mm-hmm. So to your definition, Michael, my definition of this, and by the way, Clayton Christensen also defines disruptive innovation of different kinds. There's a whole taxonomy. He wrote about it in 1995, the article, then a book in 97, The Innovator's Dilemma, then The Innovator's Solution, then The Innovator's DNA. He hasn't stopped talking about it since. And there's a lot of academic material about it. But putting all of that aside, you can think about it like this. There are 2 types of innovation: sustaining innovation and non-sustaining innovation. Okay? Sustaining innovation does the following thing. Any type of innovation that sustains your current business model, strategy, a work environment, business environment, that keeps the ship going in the same direction, could be tweaking a little bit to the sides, but in general it sustains your business. That is sustaining innovation. It includes process innovation and incremental and product innovation and all of the type of innovation that we all know so well. So that's one type. Non-sustaining innovation is disruptive innovation. And that is any type of innovation that is counterproductive to the existing business model. And my definition, close to Michael's definition, is disruptive innovation is a surprising change to the business environment that makes existing value creation strategies ineffective. Okay? And in that respect, it is detrimental, it is massive. It could lead to a destruction of a company, and there are a lot of examples, and I'm sure that you've heard all of those names before. So disruption used to be exogenous, and it used to be random and very, very rare. For example, 65 million years ago, a big comet hit the Earth and created massive disruption. We couldn't do anything about it, or the dinosaurs couldn't do anything about it. It's external, it's an act of God, it happens, and everything has to kind of change the environment. The only species that could survive were species that could move fast enough from one environment to another environment, and most of the dinosaurs didn't survive. Things changed rapidly when we first invented tools. When I say we, it's a very broad definition of we. Those were primates at the time. Not sure that they would classify as humans. But we started creating tools. And in tools, we started creating innovation that was intentional, purposeful. And that was a singularity moment, a real deep shift in history. Because it started making disruption, or disruptive events, or disruptive innovation, it started making it less random and less exogenous. We could control it. And so most of the innovation over millions so the first tools that we know of are dated 2.5 million years ago, maybe 2.7, there are a lot of arguments around that. These were basic stone tools, chiseled rock. Then for 2.5 million years, most of the innovation was incremental. Somebody found a way to create, sharp edges on a rock, and then for 2.5 million years, there were incremental changes in that innovation. That was great, until we discovered metal, until we got to the Bronze Age. First manipulation of metals was with gold around 8,000 years ago. The Bronze Age started around 2,500 BC. That was a disruptive technology in the sense that if you held iron or bronze or metal swords or tools, you had a huge advantage over other species, other cultures that didn't have that. My point is this: the minute intention came into play, disruption started accelerating. Disruptive innovation and progress in general started accelerating. Only exponential graphs start really, really flat. In the beginning, it looks like this: 2.5 million years, very small incremental changes. And what I'm trying to tell you is that I think that this is where we are right now. I think that today we are in the inflection point. And in the progress of mankind, of humanity, disruptive events, most of the time it's incremental innovation, sustaining innovation, slightly better improvements to what we have. But every now and then, boom, something massive happens. Somebody, for example, the printing press, Gutenberg. If you look at the literacy rates in Europe, and you look at the proliferation of books and printing presses in Europe, they follow each other in a 50-year gap. So Europe was almost totally illiterate in the 15th century. 1438, I think, Gutenberg invented the printing press, and you can immediately see an exponential graph in uprise of literacy. Internet did similar things. I think blockchain is doing similar things today. So that is a little bit about the history of disruption or disruptive innovation. Remember this: it's not new. It was always here. Okay, let's talk a little bit about variance. For the first billion years on this planet, the means of reproduction was cloning. Okay? Single-cell organisms would simply replicate their own DNA and create another one. And they were identical. It was a very efficient, effective way of growing. However, it had its problems because it created zero variety. And when you have zero variety, your ability to address changes in your environment becomes very difficult. And so sexual reproduction took about 1 billion years to start happening. And once sexual reproduction started, really interesting things happened because every single time that you take two sets of chromosomes and you bring them together, you're creating something new. That is also why inbreeding is not a good idea. So anyway, in a way, you want to create a variety of chromosomes when you bring them together in order to create something new. Something new is sometimes good and sometimes bad. Sometimes it will lead to something very, very interesting. And we all know about Darwin's theory of survival of the... Not really. Darwin never said that. Actually, sometimes people say survival of the adaptive. He never even said that. The quote, the survival of the fittest, I couldn't find it anywhere. I could find the survival of the adaptive from 1953 by a biologist that was talking about Darwin's book. But the concept is survival of the adaptive in any way, not of the fittest, meaning that a species survive if they can adapt to change quickly. And in order to adapt to change quickly, you need to have a high degree of variance in you. I used to work inside my own office with my own people and in my own bubble, and then one day I moved to a co-working space, and the difference was massive. What you get is a pool of resources and talents and perspectives and ideas. And I know that for me to walk from my office to the bathroom, I get stopped 10 times along the way by different people that I meet. And I talk to them, and ideas come up, and different perspectives come up, and it's a very fruitful, it's a cross-pollination that is very productive. So I think first and foremost, the promise, value creation of places like this is the ability to create variance. And I don't know if you've started counting marriages that happen here, but I think you should if you haven't. And I'm not kidding, it's the same process. People meet and things happen. Yeah? Humility. Let's talk about humility. How much time do I have?
You're done.
I'm done? I need
Needs time for questions.
5 minutes. No, just want to show something. Okay. So, I've been developing this actual graph, or I don't even want to call it a framework. It's so trivial that I don't know how to address it. Recently, I was a keynote speaker in a conference in Colombia talking about managing disruption and how to do it. And one of the things that I was talking about is humility as a function of flexibility. Here I would say. Chaos, and here I would say bureaucracy, and here I would say me, and here is I know nothing, okay? And my point, and by the way, this is true for corporations, for established companies. For startups, you switch humility with infantile. So how infantile you are. But my point is this. You want to be, in order to be effective in a rapidly changing business environment, what you need to be is humble enough, not all the way up. You need a backbone, yeah? You know something. You need to be humble enough to accept the possibility that totally different perspectives by people that know nothing about your business could actually create value. My ability to do what I do stems from the fact that I don't care about your business. I am committed to you as a client, but I didn't build it. I don't have your biases, I don't have your perspective, I don't know exactly what you guys do. I spoke yesterday to a senior vice president of one of the largest oil companies in the world. He's a friend. We met in 2010. And one of the things I told him is the innovation environment for oil and gas in Israel is not advanced. We are way behind you. And still I think that Israel could be a source of innovation for the oil and gas companies because we don't know a lot about this industry. Because we could repurpose existing technologies and serve your needs. Because we don't have the biases. So that's the first thing. I would say a little bit of humility, well, a lot of humility, but not too much. And I would also say some flexibility. Now, turning tomorrow into a super agile, flexible speedboat is not going to happen. I don't know how to tell you this. But it is too much to ask, and I don't think you should ask for that. But going to a co-working space, connecting with startups, innovators, sources of innovation, smaller, more agile companies, and externalizing some of this agility and having the capacity to enjoy their agility would help a company move in the flexibility dimension. And my point is that if you do this at 2x2, you don't want to be here, which means you have no backbone and it's totally chaotic. But you do want to be here, which is a sweet spot of being humble enough to accept the possibility that other things, that other people could actually know a thing or two. And be flexible enough to adapt quickly. Disruption is like rain. It's something that happens to you. It's a phenomenon. It is not an action that you do intentionally. That is my take on disruption. However, if we talk a little bit about disruptive innovation, and I think that's what people mean when they say disruption, so maybe it's just semantics. If you talk about disruptive innovation, I do give an alternative definition to it. And the alternative definition, it's not an alternative, it's one of the definitions, is a rapid, surprising change to the business environment that makes existing value creation strategies ineffective. That is, for me, disruptive innovation. Now, the reasons why companies shouldn't disrupt themselves is twofold. One, disruption is not a good event. They should innovate, their products, for sure. They should invest in disruptive innovation, for sure. But to disrupt yourself without the purpose of creating something new or something different, so that's the first reason. That's the first reason. The second reason is it's extremely difficult. If you really want to disrupt yourself, you need to think orthogonally to what you're already doing. You need to basically hedge your own strategy. To go to a CEO of a company, and I've been doing nothing but that for 2 years, and to tell them that in a volatile environment, the only sensible thing for a company to do is to hedge its risks. How do you do that? You consider the improbable. Let me ask you, Aaron, do you have life insurance?
Yeah.
Yeah. You realize that every single time that you pay the premium for the life insurance, you're making a bet and paying money for that bet that you're going to die tomorrow.
It's whole life insurance, so it's a different type of policy. So it's an investment.
I have that life insurance, so I'm going to talk about mine. Okay? Okay? For every time I pay life insurance, every single time I make a bet that I'm going to die tomorrow. Because if I'm going to die tomorrow naturally, then my wife will get the payout. Now, it is not my strategy to die tomorrow. I am happy. There's no depression in my family. Everything's good. Okay? But I do know that sometimes people die, and sometimes it happens unexpectedly. And so I plan for that, and I take some of my resources, and I invest them in something that I think is highly improbable. But if it happens, it's literally the end. And I think corporations should do that. I think corporations should invest some of their resources in considering the improbable but possible. And last example, the brain of a sperm whale is 7 times bigger and heavier than the brain of a human being. But human beings have a complexity in their brain that is unparalleled by anything else. Billions of neurons, 10,000 connections on average per neuron. The complexity and interconnectivity is what fosters and promotes innovation. And these type of things happen in a sort of ganglia, in places like this, where a lot of different things connect together and create that diversity. I don't know if I answered your question. I think I diverted at a certain point. But
Yeah,
I
that's
hope I
good.
did.
You controlled the interview, that's good.
We have a question here.
Yes. A friend of mine once told me that you should never talk about innovation projects, you should only talk about innovation experiments, because you can't fail an experiment, you can only get surprising results. I didn't really talk about the age of surprise, but I think you got the gist of it. I need to close, so I promised you that I'm going to say what I said, right? So after presenting myself, we talked a little bit about the origins of disruption, the fact that it was always here, the fact that it's like a catalyst. And that today, we simply get it more and more and more. And so we don't have time to react. We need to move faster. And then we talked a little bit about the importance of variance, humility, rigidness, and flexibility. Thank you.